So my special guest today is Gary Musler, and I think you're really going to enjoy him for a couple of reasons. Firstly, he's generated over, hundreds of thousands of leads for law firms. He's one of the few guys in this actual space who knows what he's doing. And by knows what he's doing, I mean specifically he knows how to generate return on investment for lawyers using Google pay-per-click. And, where a lot of other kind of PPC companies get this wrong is they really just think creating the ad is their only process. And Gary really looks at the whole thing, which is, the ads themselves, the content, the landing pages, the follow-up, what you say, how to track the results, what you say on the phone and all that stuff, and putting it together so that you ultimately get a, return on investment. So I think you're going to really, really enjoy this interview, especially if you're interested in generating Google leads. Gary, first of all, thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me, Frankie.
So if you don't mind me asking, first question is, how did you really get into this? What made you want to generate leads, on the internet using Google for lawyers?
That could probably be summed up in one word, and that's pain. I was feeling an awful lot of pain in my financial planning practice at the time. It was very challenging. I was working 15 hours a day or more, 7 days a week, and that's what was required to really accomplish the goals that I had set out for myself. And I was willing to do that for the most part. But you throw in the mix of working 7 days a week, 15 hours a day, combine that with dealing with crazy clients, and it has a way of wearing you down and creating all kinds of family stress, business stress, and it was really, Frankie, it was out of desperation. I didn't see any way out of hitting the numbers that I wanted to. I certainly couldn't work any more days in the week, and there weren't any more hours, so it was just a very painful time, and I knew that there needed to be solution. In fact, I don't share this too often, but the stress and anxiety caused from working that kind of work caseload was resulted in hysterical blindness for a little bit. Every day when I would walk up the stairs in the office, my eyes would get a little blurry, and by the time my foot reached the top step, I was blind, and I had to feel my way to the office. And I knew that this was not a good way to live your life, and I needed to find a solution so that I didn't have to just take any client that came on board. It was that type of desperation that really drove me to find the solution that we enjoy today.
Interesting you mentioned that, because it's not like I know any attorneys out there listening to this who are working 15-hour days and having crazy clients.
Not at all.
So when it comes to, Gary, I see so many attorneys, they try pay-per-click and they fail miserably and they find it really, really expensive. What is the biggest mistake that you see over and over that attorneys make that really prevents them from being successful with generating these leads on the internet?
Well, first I'd want to say, what's that old adage? The attorney that represents himself in court has a fool for a client.
Yeah.
Well, kind of the same thing holds true, I think, when it comes to marketing, in that oftentimes people don't know what they don't know, and I see so many mistakes being made that they're positioning themselves really for failure right out of the gate because they're not paying attention to so many of the important things. It's never just one thing that makes something work, right? It's a number of things working together. So, one of the things that I see happening is that people don't pay attention to the initial message of how they brought somebody to the table. In other words, at the end of the day, what we all want to do is attract people that we want to work with, right? And repel the people that we don't want to work with. And there's a real science and art to doing that. And just most people don't pay attention to those type of details to create the life that they really want, their professional and personal life.
Interesting. Yeah, I've definitely seen a gauntlet of mistakes that, come from all kinds of, ads and messages and not really thinking about this kind of step. So say somebody's out there, they're listening and they're actually running their own Google AdWords at this point, and they haven't hired a professional like you or me, and as crazy as that is, what are some actionable steps? Like, how can they, take some steps towards having a successful Google campaign? Like, what would be the first thing you would do if you were in their shoes?
Well, I think to help pre-frame them when they're sitting down and analyzing what they're going to be doing with their AdWords campaign, if they want to take a look at it from the perspective of it's a case that they're putting together, right? And there needs to be congruency from A to Z throughout the process. So to break it down to one thing would be next to impossible. But first, they need to properly identify what type of keywords are going to be bringing the type of people and the type of cases that they want to the table. And at the same point in time, prevent those type of people from even being exposed to your advertising so that you're not wasting money getting in front of those type of people. Then when you think about crafting and coming up with the right keywords, you need to make sure that your message that is being exposed to those people based on the keywords is congruent and consistent with the keywords and ultimately really what they want to do at the end of the day. Then there's the other components, right? Like what happens when they click on the ad? What's their user experience? So if you think about, what happens when you, let's say that you're going into a restaurant, you can't see in the window, you open the door and you take a look in and almost instinctively you know whether or not you're going to stay there or you're going to go to the restaurant down the road. Well, think about your website and the message that's on the website. Is it professional? Is it inviting? Is it congruent with what they searched for? Is it congruent with the ad that they clicked on? And this is an area that so many attorneys mess up because more times than not, they're driving their traffic, their audience or prospect to their website, which can sometimes have a convoluted message. And then it gets even worse because what happens? People come there, and what do we know is that a small percentage of the population will take action right then and there, even though they're interested, because things happen. Phone call, secretary barges in, kid starts crying. So many distractions that pull them away from that. And so I think that anybody who wants to really be effective with marketing online needs to think about how all the pieces of the puzzle fit together before they take such a big undertaking as attempting to do it on their own.
That is extremely valuable. Can you just talk to me for a minute about something that I see so few people do, which is, retargeting, and can you kind of just illustrate why that's important and how that kind of can take their results to the next level?
Yeah, that's a great question because I think that it is one of those areas that's sorely overlooked, and it's actually the difference maker that can have the impact of increasing your results, as much as 5 times over what you would ordinarily expect, and it makes perfect sense too when you think about it because it's kind of what we all ask other people to do for us all day long. And I don't know about you, Frankie, but if you ever ask anybody to remind you of something, hey, remind me to do this. So that's really, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say I couldn't function without Google Calendar reminding me of all the stuff I got to do.
Well, and that's the beautiful thing today is that through the use of remarketing, that's really what we're doing is we're just reminding the person that, hey, listen, they had an interest in your product or service. In this particular case, we're talking about obviously the legal profession. And if somebody has done a search for a divorce attorney, a personal injury attorney, transactional, whatever it be, they've come there, they've raised their hand, they've identified some interest, but they haven't executed yet. And there could be a multitude of reasons. But we don't want to let them go yet because the biggest part and the most expensive part is that initial contact. And so for you to be able to remarket and follow the people across different channels on Google, on Facebook, and over 290 different traffic sources that are out there can be pretty powerful. And, I would say that anybody who is not remarketing is just throwing money away and completely missing the whole concept of marketing by not implementing a sound remarketing system.
Totally. It's my favorite thing about your system, by the way, which is, one of the things I kind of always explain it to people like this is, imagine you were going to buy a house and you searched for, houses to buy in your local area and you clicked an ad. Would you immediately call the house, drive over, sign the deal, and purchase a house 5 minutes later?
I like that.
And the answer, of course, is of course not, right? Because we forget that as humans, we're conditioned to putting off buying decisions. And so what happens is most people, no matter how great your message is, they're just not going to respond the first time you visit there. And so retargeting allows you to kind of stay in touch with them, really, and to send them helpful information until they are ready to decide and keep you at the forefront of that. And interestingly enough, and when you mention that, you're totally right that the initial expense in that first click is all the cost, and not all of it, but the largest part of the cost, and the retargeting, the follow-up is actually where all the results really happen for most of our clients anyway. I'm sure you're seeing similar stuff.
Yeah. You raise an interesting point because, to say the word remarketing or retargeting without really doing what you said, and that was qualifying it by providing value, I think that's the thing that is the real game changer. It's not enough just to be in front of somebody's face, because if you're just in front of somebody's face without providing any value, then you become a little bit of a nuisance. But
speaking of that nuisance, just to add to that, an example of it done horribly wrong. We just took a trip to Chicago like 6 months ago, and they retargeted my girlfriend, and every time she visits a website, it's the same ad, not any different. And they haven't put any frequency capping, so just like 100 times a day, it's like, do you want to go to Chicago? Do you want to go to Chicago? Do you want to go to Chicago? And we've already booked and paid for the trip, right? So everything's done. And that's the way to do it horribly wrong, just for illustrating. Could you maybe just give a quick example of one way you can do it correctly?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And that's an interesting experience that you had when you have an organization like that, a big organization that you would expect to know how to do things properly, and they totally boggle it like that. But listen, Frankie, what attorneys need to do is really distinguish themselves and separate themselves from the competition, because there certainly is no shortage of legal counsel out there. And one of the biggest things that impacts people's decision on who they do business with is that intrinsic desire that you create within the person. It's not enough just to have, something on your website that says, hey, I'm a great lawyer, look at all the wonderful things that I do. Obviously, having social proof and having a great online reputation is really helpful, and I'm seeing more and more guys and gals take advantage of that. But really, ultimately, the thing that creates that intrinsic desire is when you build affinity with your audience, and there's no better way of doing that than providing them with value. And what I mean by that is it's incumbent upon us to earn our clients' business. And the best way to do that is by being as helpful as possible. So one of the things that we do is we serve up what we call passive return agents. When somebody comes to your website and we capture their MAC address information, that's about continuing our relationship. It's not about stalking. That's the difference. You were stalked. We're having a relationship. And
right.
And your behaviors are completely different, right? So with the relationship that we're building, we're providing with helpful information that somebody who would have come to your website based on the keywords would find useful and helpful, so that they associate that help with you. And by providing that help, it elevates your position to that of an authority in your space. And it's when you have that authority in your space that you're no longer having to take on any client who walks in the door, and you're certainly not having to close them. You've provided enough value that they intrinsically know that you are the attorney that they want to work with. That's how to properly remarket.
That is extremely powerful, which is really interesting because, obviously we're big fans of this, and this interview is a perfect example of that. I mean, if you're out there listening to it, I mean, if this was an interview where we just basically said, hey, I'm great, I've done this, and listed it like a resume, you probably wouldn't be listening to it right now. So that's really, really awesome, to show people how to share value. And I think there's a lot of different ways you can do that. But for most attorneys, I would imagine the best way to start is really just answering the questions that people are already asking. And so I know one of the questions our listeners are going to have right now is, if they're interested in finding out more about you and hearing about your services, what's the best way for them to kind of, get more information on you, Gary?
Oh, thanks, Frankie. Let me go ahead and give out my website as well as my email address. The website is bigmouthmarketing.co. And to find me and send me an email, it's simply Gary, Gary, @bigmouthmarketing.co.
Yeah, Gary, thanks so much for taking some time to do this.
Yeah, thank you, Frankie. I enjoyed it.